Welcome into another episode of the Big City Sports Podcast. And today is the day that we've all been waiting for. It's draft day, ladies and gentlemen. Kevin Costner, pull up a chair, watch your great movie, Draft Day. Drake, the great song, Draft Day, of course, about Johnny Manziel and A. Wiggins. I wish you could take back those two names back. But either way, it's draft day, and we're going to go through our little mock to where one person picks the evens, one person picks the odds. We don't know what the pick is going to be yet, so we're going to flip a coin on air. But first, before we do that, Swig, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm excited. Draft week is one of my favorite weeks of the entire year. By the time this comes out, it will be draft day of day one. So one of my it's like Hanukkah to me, man. I'm really excited for it. And by the way, before we get into it, I just want to make sure I say this one more time, that of top 300 big board and the full 7-round mock draft with some trades that I was talking about on the last episode. It's about done. So it's Monday night as we're recording this. I'm going to finish it on Tuesday, and it will both of them will be posted at some point Wednesday afternoon, so the day before the draft, so make sure to check that out. And then so before we get to it here, I got this coin we're going to flip. For anyone who doesn't know, heads is going to be odds, tails is going to be evens. Dylan, you're going to call it here in a second. I'm going to flip it. You ready?
Sounds good, Roger. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Dropped it. All right, what do you got?
Heads.
It is heads.
All right. Go ahead.
That means I don't have to pick the Giants pick. Thank God.
That means that I am at 11, or that means I am with the odds. So that's how we're going to get this one underway. So everybody every team is talked about today with their picks. No trades in this one. So that's how it's going to roll. But the first pick in the draft, Trevor Lawrence, quarterback, Clemson.
I'm really, really surprised. You want to give any sort of analysis on that one?
Well, he's been rumored to be number one for a very long time. So makes a lot of sense. First number one overall selection in Jaguars history. Believe it or not, they've had a lot of bad years. Never been the worst team in the NFL until last season. So they get rewarded with a generational talent at one.
Yeah, you got to thank the Jets for winning 2 straight games for that one. Still don't really get it. But you're the Jaguars fan. You think Lawrence is going to live up to the hype?
I do. I came on. I was on this show during the season, and we had that little Jaguars segment that we talked about Trevor Lawrence when they started losing games, or when the Jets started winning games. But either way, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to save football in Jacksonville. He's someone that can just embrace the city. There's been rumors about moving to London. Lawrence comes in with weapons on the outside. Now, it's not big names, but you have a pretty solid offense behind you. You brought in Marvin Jones in free agency. You have DJ Chark on the outside. Laviska Shenault, very versatile there. I think you add a few linemen with these picks coming up. You have 3 second-rounders, 2 first-rounders, add a tight end, add some linemen, and get some defense. I think this is going to be a pretty good football team in a few years.
Yeah, it could be. You still got to remember that it's a project, and I'm still really curious to see how Urban Meyer translates to the NFL. I was honestly still a little surprised by that hiring, but I do agree. Trevor Lawrence, it's been obvious he's been the first pick since he was a freshman and won the national championship. So speeding up the pace a little bit, we're going to go obvious here for the second pick as well. The Jets are going to take Zach Wilson out of BYU.
Yeah, they are. I think that's a given, of course. The first two, it's a lock on who they are, and Zach Wilson, he's someone at BYU, really had a great season last year. And I think looking forward to this Jets roster, obviously this Jets team is who we cover on the Big City Sports Podcast. But I think Zach Wilson is someone that can step in. And a lot of times Jets have had to take a quarterback in a draft, and they all expect them to be the next Joe Namath. Now, I'm not saying Zach Wilson will be that, but I think he'll be the best starting quarterback the Jets have had in a draft in a very long time.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I do think there are some flaws to his game, but I do like the arm talent, the significant improvement from 2019 to 2020 at BYU. I thought he had the biggest jump in between years in this year's class. Still not in the stratosphere of what Joe Burrow did between 2018 and 19 at LSU, but I'm not trying to unfairly pin that on Wilson. I do think the arm talent is there, but I do think he overtrusts his arm a little bit. The mental processing needs a little work, but I'm sure Robert Saleh is going to be excited to get such a high upside QB at second overall. And now we got to get to the pick where it really gets interesting. It's been the most polarizing pick in any mock draft. Who do you have going number 3 to the 49ers?
Oh, on my one, real quick, last note real quick on Zach Wilson. I had a buddy tell me he kind of reminds him of Jimmy Clausen just by the way he looks. So kudos to him for that little reference there. But yeah, it was something, isn't it?
Well, if he's saying he looks like Clausen, does that mean you want to punch him in the face? Because that's the vibe I always got.
Yeah, the resting face. We'll say that because
Resting dick face.
Yeah, there we go. RDF. Ding, ding, ding. Anyway,
I hope he's listening to this.
Speaking of the draft and ding, ding, dings, on the clock is the San Francisco 49ers. If you saw my mock out on social media, I have Trey Lance going here. But in this mock draft, just to keep it interesting, I'm going Mac Jones at number 3 overall. There's a lot of rumors on who this is going to be. It's about 50-50 right now. I personally believe that the media wants Mac Jones, fans want Justin Fields, but the 49ers want Trey Lance. Now, those are the 3 that I think it feels, but for some reason, I don't know what, I'm going to go Mac Jones with this pick.
Interesting. And that was the rumor that's what they were going to do when they first made that trade up with to the 3rd pick in the draft. And there was the report that came out yesterday at the time of recording this that they were down to choosing between Lance and Jones, and therefore not picking Justin Fields because everyone's expecting Lawrence and Wilson to be the first 2 picks, right? And I said this to you a few minutes ago. I still don't buy that the 49ers traded up to number 3 without knowing who they wanted. That doesn't make any sense to me. They know who the first 2 picks off the board are going to be, just like the rest of us, unless something crazy happens in the next 3 days, right? So you can't convince me that the 49ers didn't make this pick knowing they wanted Fields, they wanted Lance, they wanted Jones. But Jones is a prospect. I think is the best in terms of accuracy in this class. I think he's the best in terms of mental processing and poise. He has great touch on his deep ball, but he also has average arm strength at best, and he's not a mobile threat. So at the same time, any quarterback can work in Kyle Shanahan's offense, but I look at Mac Jones and I just feel like that the QBs that your best case scenario is as a comp, maybe Kirk Cousins, maybe Andy Dalton. I know we've talked about that off pod before. And to me, you want to get better than those 2 guys with the 3rd overall pick.
Yeah, you look at Mac Jones, and the reason I picked him here is because he's a Kyle Shanahan quarterback. Now, he hasn't won with this style of quarterback, but it's someone that's bigger, can stand in the pocket and make throws. You go back to his Atlanta days. Matt Ryan, a similar stature. We mentioned Kirk Cousins. He was actually working with Cousins before, so he has a lot of stature quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo right now as well. So someone that can just stand in the pocket and direct the football down the field. Mac Jones' smarts might be the reason that Kyle Shanahan likes this player. So I think that's why they could potentially be leaning Mac Jones at 3.
The intelligence, I don't doubt, at least on the field. But to me, it's just a higher floor, lower upside pick. And at the same time, while the 49ers have said they're going to keep Jimmy Garoppolo, and Kyle Shanahan came out with the quote today that they had 5 different quarterbacks they could have chosen from at 3. And it's kind of strange to get a little bit of insight into that draft process a little bit. But this is the pick where the draft really starts to me. I would be really surprised if it's not Lawrence and Wilson, the first 2 picks, just like everyone else. But this whole time, I personally haven't bought that they really traded up to number 3 just to take Mac Jones. I think there is some truth that he, at the very least, he was considered. But if they're really serious about keeping Garoppolo around for 2021, to me, Trey Lance is the only quarterback that they could take that wouldn't be breathing down his neck or pressured to start right away.
And that's the reason you do it. I mean, you look at the window. I know the window with the 49ers is they're a potential championship football team when healthy. There's a lot of talent on this football team, great coaching staff. I know they lost Robert Saleh, but still a great coaching staff. And they're a team that could really take that next step. Now, it's a similar situation to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I know a lot of people are going to play the Mahomes card. I'm not going to say that Trey Lance is Patrick Mahomes, but Alex Smith, for one season, came in, played football, did his job, got traded, and then boom, it was Patrick Mahomes' show after sitting behind a veteran like that, learning how to play. I think you bring in someone like a Trey Lance here, sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo for one season. Garoppolo sat behind Brady, so he's no slouch when it comes to grooming young quarterbacks. He could play the Brady role there and see himself out of town. If he has a good season, maybe he gets a new contract somewhere, and the 49ers get what they want, which is Trey Lance, a year older, a year wiser in the National Football League, to come in and start for a potential championship roster.
It's possible, man. I definitely see both lines of thinking, but to me, either way, I mean, obviously trading up to number 3, whichever quarterback the 49ers end up with, it's a big risk that's going to affect the near and long-term future of this franchise. They're just in a very interesting spot, and I'm curious to see what they do. But I do want to move on to the next pick here. To me, the Atlanta Falcons, who I have at number 4, is also a really, really difficult one to project. I thought about seeing it, putting a quarterback here. Justin Fields is still available. I still think they would ideally want to trade down, but considering that the Bengals and the Dolphins at 5 and 6 aren't going anywhere, they're going to draft either linemen or skill position players. And considering the Lions at number 7, that's the team I think that teams are going to target to try to trade up. And the mock I have, I'm going to have the Lions making a trade down from that spot. So any team that wants whichever quarterbacks of those 5 big ones that are still on the board are going to trade up with Detroit or Carolina to try to get in front of Denver. I think they don't have to trade all the way up to number 4. So because of that, and because Matt Ryan was given a contract extension, I don't think Arthur Smith is going to be able to resist Kyle Pitts at number 4 here. So that's going to be my pick.
Yeah, that makes sense. He's been rumored there for a little while. Someone that, I mean, he's not just a tight end. He's someone that he's a nightmare. He's a matchup nightmare. Someone you can set up out wide. And you talk about an offense. Now, I know the running game isn't that good. Mike Davis, not a shot on you, but you look at the weapons on the outside. Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, who has been coming up in trade rumors, he might end up being moved before this episode drops. Highly unlikely there, but those on the outside still have Kyle Pitts. I think for a fantasy perspective, Matt Ryan could be the best quarterback in fantasy football.
Well, if the Falcons are drafting Kyle Pitts to make him a good fantasy quarterback, they really need to be shot because that's not what's important. But points definitely taken there. To me, Kyle Pitts, ignore the tight end designation. He's just an offensive weapon. You can line him up in the slot. You can line him up in the backfield, out wide, wherever. He is what I would call an F tight end instead of a Y tight end who lines up next to the tackle on the line of scrimmage, or an H tight end who lines up in the backfield or offset a little bit. You just need to move him all over and use him as a chess piece because he will be a nightmare for opposing defenses. And I think Arthur Smith is going to be really excited to get him in this offense and try to have one late career resurgence for Matt Ryan and company in Atlanta.
That would be a nice fit. I mean, Kyle Pitts, there's so many people that fall in love with him and want him high. But I personally, in my mock, have him 8 at the Panthers. Now, the reason I have that is because I feel DK Metcalf, he was someone that was very lit up when it came to the combine, when it came to seeing what he can do. They're like, wow, this guy's amazing. But he still was a second-round pick, even with all the hype around him. A lot of experts still had him mid first round grade on him, but he ended up falling. Now, I'm not saying Kyle Pitts is anything like DK Metcalf or anything like that, but I feel like he's one of these. I've gone through the tendencies over the last few years in the NFL draft, and players like this tend to be overvalued just a little bit, and sometimes they end up falling on draft night. And I think Kyle Pitts can be accustomed to something like that.
So what I heard from that is that you think he's going to fall to 64th, just like DK Metcalf.
No.
That's exactly what you said. You heard it here first, everybody.
He's a top 10 pick. I just don't know if he's top 5.
Dylan thinks he's going to fall to 64th overall. Now, I definitely get what you're saying. I don't think he would fall to number 8 if the Falcons don't take him at number 4. I feel like the Bengals would give him strong consideration. And if they don't take him, I feel like the Dolphins would jump all over him at number 6, because there's no doubt in my mind, at the very least, that they traded up to get a skill position player. And if Pitts is still on the board, there's no doubt in my mind he would at least be considered.
Even with Mike Gesicki there?
Yeah, I think so. Even with Mike Gesicki there.
That's where it got weird for me. That's why I had him falling. I was like, the Dolphins have Gesicki, Lions have Hockenson. I was like, if he falls out of the top 5, the Panthers are getting a gem.
I still think the Panthers are an opportunity to trade down. And I still think they might try to prioritize their offensive line as well, because they don't want Sam Darnold seeing ghosts in Carolina like he did with the Jets.
Oh, that's a shot right there. Was that Lil Jon style? But anyway, the Dolphins are now on the clock, and
we got the Bengals.
Bengals. I already wrote my pick in there. That pick, I believe 100% is Penei Sewell, whatever. He's the left guard or left tackle from Oregon. I think he comes into that offense. You need to find protection for Joe Burrow. And I know you drafted Jonah Williams last year, or 2 years ago, whatever it was. You slide him to left guard. A lot of people expected him to play guard out of college. He believed he was the left tackle. But I think you slide him over, and it only makes your offensive line better. Your blind side is going to be protected for multiple years there if you're Joe Burrow.
Absolutely. To me, Sewell makes the most sense for the Bengals. Get that elite left tackle, who I still think would be an insane value at 5th overall if he does end up falling that far. And I feel like that is likely. I don't think it's impossible that the Falcons go for him, but we all know that the first 3 picks aren't going to be Sewell. So if the Bengals absolutely need to upgrade their offensive line, Joe Burrow took a beating behind it in his rookie season, eventually tearing his ACL. The Bengals did bring in Riley Rife in free agency on a 1-year deal, but he is a stopgap option. He's not going to be the long-term fix. So I do absolutely see the logic, but I know there's been some rumors that they might want to reunite him with Jamar Chase from LSU at that spot as well.
Ooh. I tell you, you mentioned a potential trade down for the Lions, and I know we'll get there when the Lions pick rolls around, but I feel like if Jamar Chase is off the board, I think that's their guy. So if he is off the board, it makes a lot of sense for the Lions to potentially trade down there. But you look at the Lions wide receiving room, it's bad. It's very bad there. So definitely something to be interested about there. But the Bengals, like you said, I think Penei Sewell is the right pick. Just protect that blind side. The defense honestly isn't horrible. It still needs some work. But, I mean, the safety there, Jesse Bates, Fort Wayne native, he does a great job. One of the top 5 safeties in the league, in my opinion. And should be a lot of fun to watch this Bengals football team with the young talent on that roster.
Yeah, they did sign Trey Hendrickson in free agency as well. I believe they brought in Larry Ogunjobi, but they still have a lot of holes on that team. So I still think the Bengals need to prioritize protecting Joe Burrow before anything else. Moving on then, that leaves me with the Dolphins pick at number 6. I said it was going to be a skill position player, and I really went back and forth on this a lot. And I made a few picks interesting just for the purpose of an entertaining podcast here too. But I still think the Dolphins traded back up to number 6 to get a skill position player to help surround Tua with. And after thinking about it a lot, I have them picking Jalen Waddle out of Alabama in this spot. Now, I personally, and again, the wide receiver class is super deep. I could easily be proven wrong on several of these guys. I personally have Jamar Chase as my first wide receiver in terms on my big board. One little spoiler there. I have Waddle one spot behind him, both in the wide receiver group and on the big board itself. They're both in my top 10, but I feel like pairing a really, really explosive, twitchy, juiced up player across from Devontae Parker, a guy like Waddle who can have a big impact in special teams as well. He's just going to provide that little extra element to turn any big play or any short gain, to the house. And especially with a weaker arm quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa in Miami, where the vertical passing game, I don't think is going to be a huge staple. They're going to rely on shorter passes and then guys to make plays after the catch. And Waddle is elite run after catch ability. I don't think Jamar Chase is quite as good in that area. So that's why I have them picking Jalen Waddle here.
I like the pick a lot. And I think you just sold me on that. I wish there was a way I could go back and change my mock, but I seriously do believe that they're going Alabama wide receiver here. I don't care if Jamar Chase is on the board. You want someone. Tua Tagovailoa at times last year, I believe by the 4th quarter in 2 games last season, he had like 90 yards passing. Like, come on, you got to throw the football in the National Football League if you want to win. So I know you have some talent on that offense, but you want someone that can step in day one that you already have chemistry with. And I like what you talked about, those slant routes that Jalen Waddle could just flip up and take one to the house. I mean, durability is an issue for him, but then again, it is for Tua Tagovailoa. So, I mean, those two connected a lot in college, a lot of big plays from those two. I think that could carry over into the NFL. And I wouldn't be shocked to see Devontae Smith here either.
No, I wouldn't be either. I personally have Smith as my wide receiver 3. I feel like it's possible he slips a little bit. He's still a first round pick for me, but to me, he's not quite in the same league as Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle. That's just me. No disrespect intended. I know the guy won the Heisman Trophy last year and won about every other important award in college football. football. So no disrespect intended, but that brings us to me, one of the most interesting picks in this draft outside of San Francisco at 3. That would be the Detroit Lions at number 7. So with the 6 picks we've made so far, who do you have them taking?
I got Jamar Chase. I told you he just sounds like a Detroit Lion from day one. Comes in, can be the number 1 receiver on their football team. No more Kenny Galladay. He's in New York. No more Marvin Jones. He's in Jacksonville. No more Danny Amendola. I'm not sure. Either way, he's not productive. So Jamar Chase is going to be their number 1 wide receiver heading into next season, and he's a darn good one at that.
No, I really do like him. I think he's a true X wide receiver, meaning true outside wide receiver 1 who can be moved inside if necessary, but I don't think you'd be taking advantage of his full skill set that way. I think, to me, now he doesn't have that same run after the catch ability that Jalen Waddle has, not even close, in fact. He's at his best at the catch point, contested catches. He can really win a 50-50 ball. I really like his route running ability. I don't think he has the best separation ability naturally, especially off the line of scrimmage releases. But overall, I still think he is the best well-rounded wide receiver prospect in this draft. If the Lions stay at number 7, which I still don't think they will, because they only have, as of now, 6 draft picks in this draft. And considering how barren their roster is, they need to make a trade down and accumulate a few more and try to replenish some assets here. And so, but if they do stay at number 7, Trey Lance and Justin Fields are still both on the board. We all know Jared Goff isn't a long-term solution in Detroit, but if he is going to stick around for a couple years, he's got to throw it to somebody. I think Chase is a good start.
Yeah, that's true. And interesting note here, Jamar Chase did not play football last season. He opted out of the season for LSU. The Lions, maybe this is an opportunity. You get him a year in the NFL, hasn't played football in a year, at least game action football in a year. And he can come in and he might be a little rusty, but that's okay because Jared Goff is probably not your long-term answer. So you could at least get him accustomed to the NFL game. So when their next quarterback comes into Detroit, he'll already have that experience at the wide receiver position. It could really benefit his career going forward.
It's going to be the Chase and Hawkins show in this scenario. That would at least give Jared Goff and whoever his successor is a couple of guys to throw to. But they obviously, I mean, Taylor Decker is the longest tenured member of that offense. So there is a lot of instability. That's not even a joke. That's an actual fact. So they have a lot of holes on the offensive line, skill positions. I am curious to see how DeAndre Swift does in year 2, but they also need to improve the offensive line if they want to maximize his talent. But anyway, the Lions are in a tough spot, but I do like Jamar Chase a lot. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers at number 8. So last season, the Panthers had 7 draft picks, and they spent all 7 of them on the defensive side of the ball, which I thought was awesome. By the way, I've never seen that before, but it made a lot of sense. Jeremy Chin had an amazing rookie year. Derek Brown got better as the year went along, etc. Yeah, they had Yetur Gross-Matos in the second round as well. But to me, after trading for Sam Darnold, which we've discussed previously, I said at the time that they were going to go for an offensive weapon in terms of a skill position player. But with Pitts, Waddle, and Chase all off the board in this mock scenario, and Penei Sewell as well, they also need to really protect Sam Darnold. So I have them going Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern here.
Oh, wow. Wow. I think this is a curveball because, I mean, we've been rumored playmaker to the Panthers for multiple weeks now. And I mean, they lost Curtis Samuel on the outside. I think you want to get someone with speed. Potentially Devontae Smith is where I would have went with this pick, but makes a lot of sense. Rashawn Slater, the next best tackle on the team or on the board rather. And I think it makes a lot of sense for the Panthers.
I mean, if Sewell's there, they would take him. Slater is still a really, really good prospect, but I think 8 is too rich for Devontae Smith in my blood. I do like his run after the catch ability as well. We know what kind of impact he has. I mean, ignore the size, ignore the weight. He had the same quote unquote issues at Alabama and was still incredibly successful. Now, can you have some concerns about his durability? Yeah, I think that's fair. But to me, it's more about I have him half a tier below what Chase, Waddle, and Pitts can do with all of them off the board. In this scenario, if I'm the Panthers, I would trade down as well because I still think it's going to be 5 quarterbacks in the top 10. It's going to be a very offensive heavy class at the top of the draft. We've only have we taken any defensive players yet?
We have not.
Exactly.
All offensive.
Right. So, and well, it might not go to number 9, 10, 11, however long until the first one on actual draft day. I'm confident saying at least the first 6 or 7 picks are going to be on the offensive side of the football. And if it's true that Denver at number 9, who we'll get to in a second, is that team that everyone's going to target to move up in front of for whichever of the 5 top quarterbacks are left, and in this case, that would be Justin Fields and Trey Lance, to me, it would be very wise of Detroit and Carolina to trade out of those spots for whichever teams, New England, Washington, Chicago, want to take those guys and accumulate more picks. But since we're not doing trades in this scenario, the Panthers offensive line still needs a lot of help. And signing a couple of Jets cast-offs in the offseason is not quite what I had in mind. Rashawn Slater might be a guard long-term, has shorter arms, but that tape against Chase Young was legendary, and he is a damn good prospect and would immediately upgrade the offensive line in Carolina.
He would. And we're going to get to the Broncos here. And, oh, man, this is just bad. This is bad. I don't like this. I don't like this right here for the Broncos. A lot of people rumored Justin Fields to the Broncos. And, I feel like if they don't believe he's the guy, this is where a team like the Patriots jump up to right here at 9 to make this move. Oh, I want to go defense. I want to go Micah Parsons, but I'm going to go with Justin Fields, quarterback, Ohio State. It just, I don't buy it, but I believe
it. Well, that's kind of the expert analysis that we all tune in for. Look, to me, I don't think it's impossible that Denver ends up with Justin Fields, but at the same time, I would be a little surprised if somebody doesn't push the issue if he's falling past the top 6. I would be really surprised if he ends up at number 9. And honestly, in this scenario, since we're not doing any trades for this episode to streamline it a little bit, it feels likely that Trey Lance is going to fall to number 15 or so now, right? He just has to, right? Looking at just not trying to take the focus off Denver too much here, but the next few picks, Dallas, the Giants, they're not going to take a quarterback in this draft. I'd be really surprised if Philadelphia did. I mean, it would be something to draft another one after Jalen Hurts that quickly. The Chargers at 13 have Justin Herbert in place. So just looking ahead a little bit, Trey Lance is going to end up falling at least a few more picks, if anyone's wondering. Fields, I do really, really like him. I don't think he's getting enough credit. Now, there was a little bit of time when I was looking at him, especially that Northwestern Big Ten championship, where I wasn't particularly impressed. And in the game against Indiana, he seemed to be confused a little bit by the disguising coverages, but he is still an incredibly talented passer with great mobility. He is able to make throws into tight windows. It's just telling a really talented guy not to trust his arm too much. And I feel like that's something that he can be taught. Drew Lock, Broncos fans were extremely confident in him heading into last season. He finished 2019 on a pretty decent note, but he was an absolute disaster in 2020. You can make the argument he was the worst full-time starting quarterback in the NFL. And the Broncos, it seemed like corner was going to be a huge match for them for a long time, but they ended up with Ronald Darby and Kyle Fuller in free agency. So I don't see them taking a corner here at this spot. To me, it's either going to be a quarterback or Micah Parsons at number 9 if they don't end up making a trade.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning. I wouldn't be shocked. You talked about Trey Lance falling. I look at 2 teams that aren't rumored, but could potentially trade up to get, or even stay put if he keeps falling, to get Trey Lance. And that's the Minnesota Vikings and the Las Vegas Raiders. I feel like what Gruden can do with Trey Lance would be phenomenal. He's sort of a similar quarterback to Marcus Mariota, to where he has that added mobility. And if he sits behind, or not necessarily, not Mariota, I'm thinking Derek Carr. You look at Derek Carr, he has more mobility than Derek Carr. But I think that he's someone that could come in and wait a year in that role. I mean, Gruden loves quarterbacks. And if he likes his potential talent, I think that that's something he'll be okay with at 17.
Yeah, I mean, I could see him making a trade up if somebody falls. We all know John Gruden's not afraid to be aggressive. The Raiders, to me, are a really interesting team to peg, and we'll get to them in a few picks. I want to finish off the top 10 here really quick. You speed this up a little bit because we still got 22 more picks to get to. We haven't picked a defensive player yet. We're to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to end that drought. I think I have the Cowboys taking a corner here. My question is, which one? I mean, their offense, I think, is going to be much better next season. If Dak Prescott is healthy, if they get Tyron Smith and Zach Martin back healthy, and we all know the skill position the guys they have on offense with Ezekiel Elliott and Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup. So to me, their pass defense, I have them going Patrick Surtain here, corner out of Alabama. I'm not necessarily saying he's the best corner in the class overall, but I do think he has the best technique, has the highest ability to step in day one and be an effective starter. He doesn't have great top end speed, so I do see him getting burned on some big plays occasionally, but he's a guy that really trusts his technique, and he should, because he's really good at it, has great feet. You don't see false steps out of him very often, and he'll kind of complement Trayvon Diggs, who was drafted out of Alabama in the second round last year, who's more of a goes for the big play, has elite ball skills type. We'll see two contrasting styles on that defense in the back end.
Oh, Surtain still gives me nightmares as a Notre Dame fan for eliminating the passing game that day. In the game, of course, when they played Alabama. But Surtain, to your point, he's just a great corner. And I've heard a lot of rumors about J.C. Horn, how they dig that his ability, sort of like a Jalen Ramsey-esque, to where he's going to talk about you a little bit. He has that swagger, that personality that a lot of defensive backs, successful defensive backs, possess. And that's why I think he's jumping up a little bit. But I think right now, Jerry Jones, a safe pick. Dallas Cowboys, Patrick Surtain is the right pick, and it's a safe pick.
Yeah, the more I hear it, the more I'm thinking it might end up being Horn, just because the Cowboys really, really love those guys with that swagger and attitude that you're talking about. And if there's one thing that J.C. Horn is really good at outside of his football skills, it's chirping the hell out of everybody. And that would fit in Dallas pretty well. But in this scenario, I have them going a little bit safer, because that Surtain match to me, I think he would fit really well in their scheme. But now we get to the pick that we all really care about, or at least I really care about. I'm honestly kind of happy that I didn't end up getting the Giants here, because I'm really curious to see what you have us doing. But I want to recap the first 10 picks here for the listeners in case they skipped ahead a little bit. So first two picks, everyone pretty obvious. We have Trevor Lawrence at 1, Zach Wilson at 2. And then we had, you ended up picking Mac Jones at number 3 to the 49ers, which I'm sure is going to polarize our listeners. Kyle Pitts at 4, Penei Sewell at 5 to the Bengals. We have Jalen Waddle at 6 to the Dolphins, Jamar Chase at 7 to the Lions, Rashawn Slater at 8 to the Panthers, Justin Fields at 9 to the Broncos, and Patrick Surtain at 10 to the Cowboys. Who do you have the Giants taking at number 11?
Oh, you're going to be pissed. I have a feeling that you're going to be pissed. Like right now in my mock, I had Rashawn Slater going to the Giants. I think that just makes a lot of sense. But we're seeing a second defensive player taken, and it's going to be an edge. And who they are taking right here is going to be defensive end Azeez Ojulari.
Okay. Explain it a little bit.
I feel like right now, the two best left tackles are off the board in Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater. Now, they could go Elijah Vera Tucker here. There's been rumors of Gettleman trading down, which usually doesn't happen. But right here at 11, I think, like we've talked about their need of pass rushers that can get to the quarterback for many years now. And Azeez Ojulari is someone that I think that the Giants would fall in love with and could potentially use on the outside, more of a pass rush role as opposed to someone that could stop the run. I think he fits well into that defense with Patrick Graham.
Interesting. So, I mean, I had my little notebook here. I was trying to find my Ojulari blurb, but no, you know what? I have it down. I've said the last couple episodes, I do think the Giants are going to end up taking an edge rusher. I'm less confident in that now than I was when we recorded last week's episode. I still think it's a strong possibility, but last year I was confident it was going to be an offensive tackle. I was a little surprised it ended up being Andrew Thomas, but I knew that they were going to pick an offensive tackle at 4, and they did. Gettleman has literally never traded down in any round in 8 drafts, which is amazing going back to his Carolina days. I would still prefer that the Giants trade down, but in the situation they stay at 11, I'm still leaning towards they end up with an edge rusher as well. I really like Ojulari's pass rushing upside. The athleticism is there, the speed, that quick first step, explosiveness, it's there. I do think he needs to develop a few more pass rush moves and hand counters. I think he's kind of a one-trick pony at the moment, but I do think there's a lot of upside with him. I do think he would fit in Graham's defense just because he's supremely talented, and I think he can fit in any defense if he's used right. But I don't see a ton of year one impact. I see some. I don't think he's a developmental entirely year one guy. The Giants absolutely need to upgrade the edge spot, but they could still go a lot of different directions here. I wouldn't rule out Devontae Smith. I wouldn't rule out Micah Parsons. I wouldn't rule out a corner. I wouldn't rule out an offensive lineman like Vera Tucker. It's just they're a tough team to peg in this year's draft. So I like Ojulari a lot as a prospect. I think 11 would be a little bit of a reach for him, but I feel like the Giants are the first team on the board who could take a pass rusher.
And we've seen the Giants for multiple drafts pick who they like. I mean, it doesn't matter their value where they are. I mean, a lot of people thought Daniel Jones could have been there at 17 that one draft when they passed on Josh Allen, a pass rusher. They took Andrew Thomas, who was high on a lot of people's draft boards, but that still could have been a little rich with their selection. And right now, I think it's another trend that we see with Azeez Ojulari. But personally, I think Ojulari is the best reach out of the last three drafts for the Giants.
Well, I mean, we've seen Gettleman go for guys from Georgia before with Lorenzo Carter and the DeAndre Baker nightmare and Andrew Thomas and even Tay Crowder at the end of last year's draft. So there's definitely a precedent for it. And you said it, Gettleman falls in love with a guy and he takes him, for better or worse. For the most part, it's been worse. But I do like Ojulari. He would at least fill a need. I'm curious to see what happens. But I could go on this for a long time. We want to move on to the Eagles. We pick number 12.
Philadelphia Eagles.
What'd you say?
Let's get to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Ugh. I went back and forth on this pick a lot as well. I think wide receiver and corner are the two main positions that they would be targeting here. But in this scenario with Waddle and Pitts and Jamar Chase off the board, and considering the fact that they spent a first round pick last year on Jalen Reagor, who's a more of a slot, speedy wide receiver type, I don't see it being Devontae Smith here. And I've heard Eagles fans who also really like that confidence are enamored with J.C. Horn. That's who I have going here at number 12.
J.C. Horn to the Eagles. You're still getting chirps in the division. It's just not coming from Dallas. It's coming from Philly, which does that make it worse?
I mean, I hate them both, and I know I'm going to get the chirps from somewhere. It's just what my life as a Giants fan is. So it's just picking my poison here. Horn as a prospect, really quick. I think there are some great things about his game. I have some pretty major concerns with him personally. I mean, the athleticism is unquestionable. He's a great zone corner. I do have a lot of concerns about him in off-man coverage. Yeah, we know he's a little grabby and gets some extra defensive holding and pass interference penalties. I do see some false steps with him in coverage, which could lead to him getting burned, especially in a division that has some pretty good wide receiver talent now with the guys I mentioned in Dallas and Kenny Galladay on the Giants and Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel in Washington. So I do think it's something to watch out for, but there is a lot of upside with J.C. Horn as well. I think he would be a great fit in his own scheme, and that's what the Eagles are going to run.
Let's get to the Chargers here at 13. And the Chargers every single year, in my opinion, I believe that they're the most predictable team in the draft. I mean, a few years ago, I believe it was 2019, obviously, go back dummy. But you look at it, and a lot of people had mocked Jerry Tillery to the Chargers. And sure enough, he went there. Last year, Justin Herbert. This year, I think it's a guaranteed lock if Christian Darrisaw is on the board that the Los Angeles Chargers take him. It just makes a ton of sense, and they get a left tackle to protect Herbert.
Oh, man. For once, we agree on this one because that's where I have Darrisaw going as well. I really do like him, especially with Sewell and Slater off the board in this scenario. I'm pretty high on Darrisaw, but to me, the major concern with him is his motor. Just he seems to take some snaps off, which is a bit of a red flag, but I still have no doubt he's going to be a round one prospect, a guy who could be a true left tackle right away. He has that length that teams are looking for. He has the athleticism and balance where he could block in both a man and zone scheme. I do really think he has the upside to be the second best tackle in this class, unless something crazy happens with Sewell. I think his ceiling is really high, but I do think there is a bit of a lower floor with him as well, just with some balance concerns, with the footwork a little bit, and with that motor. But the Chargers absolutely need to prioritize protecting Herbert, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Want to move on here to the Minnesota Vikings at number 14. This was a really interesting one for me. I To me, going through a couple of different scenarios, I think they need a lot of help at the edge rusher spot across from Daniil Hunter. And Azeez Ojulari is the only edge off the board so far. But at the end of the day, I cannot see them passing up Elijah Vera-Tucker from USC here. I think they need some help on the interior offensive line. That's who I have them picking at number 14. He's a guy I'm really high on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you think about the history of the Minnesota Vikings. They've never had an offensive line. I mean, ever. Adrian Peterson was running behind nobody, and it's been the same so far. So getting a productive tackle / guard, however they want to use them, I would hope left tackle with the way that their line's set up. But either way, I think that's a great pick for the Minnesota Vikings. They got defense last year at cornerback. They got wide receiver last year at wide receiver on the outside, Justin Jefferson. So, I mean, they have a lot of young cornerbacks. They also brought in Patrick Peterson to help them out a little bit. Left tackle makes a ton of sense, and that's definitely a lock, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, and now I'd still make the argument, Vera-Tucker, he could be viewed as a guard. He played both guard and tackle at USC, ended up being their left tackle this past season after an injury and held up very well. Long-term, I still think he would be an elite guard and a good tackle. That's just me. So I would rather use him at guard, but I could absolutely see the upside either way. And I know there are some teams that would value him or view him as a left tackle, which is more of a premier position on the offensive line. It was tough for me to pass on edge rushers here, but we're 14 picks in. There's only been 3 defensive players taken. They were 10, 11, and 12. Going next, 15, New England Patriots. Who you got?
Oh, this is tough. This is tough for sure. But I think going back to 13 real quick, the Chargers, I think Devontae Smith could be someone that the Chargers like, because outside of Keenan Allen, I mean, they had a few players step up last season. I'm drawing a blank on their names because no one knew them until week 5. Like, they just had a bunch of people step up on the outside, and it's sort of been like a rigmarole where it's just a merry-go-round tree of people coming in at the wide receiver position. Wouldn't be bad to get a young number 2 wide receiver on this football team, but it makes a lot of sense left tackle too. The Patriots, however, we know the Belichick's love for Alabama guys, and I'm going to go playmaker. I wouldn't be shocked to see Trey Lance go here, but I'm going playmaker. We're going to go playmaker to the New England Patriots with Devontae Smith.
Interesting. In this scenario, Trey Lance has fallen all the way to the second half of the first round. But they're in an interesting spot quarterback wise. Cam Newton was brought back for a year, but wide receivers were a pretty clear weak spot for the Patriots last year. They're a team that really likes to rely on their tight ends, and they brought in Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, I believe. Did they bring in both of those guys?
They did.
Okay, thought so. Wanted to make sure here. But this is a team that also drafted 2 tight ends in the 3rd round in last year's draft. They absolutely don't want to go with Bird as their leading receiver again. So I feel like wide receiver is a strong possibility. But me personally, I think they're going to end up with a quarterback. I'm going to probably have them making a trade up in my final mock, because one thing we have to consider, wide receiver is an extremely deep position in this year's class. If they do not take one in the 1st round, they absolutely can get one in the 2nd, 3rd round, whenever.
Could you potentially see the way that this draft's playing out? Could you potentially see the Patriots trading back up to the late 1st and getting a Kellen Mond?
Ooh, if they take Kellen Mond in the 1st round, congratulations, because I don't like the Patriots. I don't think it's impossible that they take some extra picks and trade back up for a quarterback. But in this scenario, I feel like they might do it if Trey Lance falls into the 20s. That I think that would make more sense. I mean, the fact that he hasn't been taken yet, a lot of people are going to be, have some raised eyebrows at this mock draft. But with the lack of trades, there's a lot less spots that make sense. And the Patriots do have a need for a playmaker. They were extremely active in free agency at about every other position. So I see the logic here. I think we move on, though, at 16 to the Arizona Cardinals. That was a tough one for me. Going through the full mock here myself, we each did our own off pod, and then we, live at the beginning here decided who was going to do odds and evens. But Arizona was a really tough one for me to project. I thought about wide receiver. We don't know what's going to happen with Larry Fitzgerald, but they still have DeAndre Hopkins. They brought in AJ Green. They have Christian Kirk. I know that the Cardinals like to run that 10 personnel with 4 wide receivers a lot, but I just don't see it being a first round pick. Got Kirk in the later second round a couple years ago. Hopkins came to them on a silver platter. They ended up with J.J. Watt in free agency, so I'd be a little surprised if they went for an edge rusher. All of this to say, need to replace Patrick Peterson. I'm going to go off the board a little bit here. I'm going to have them taking Greg Newsome out of Northwestern at number 16. Now, I don't think he is the top corner on the board at this spot. To me, that would be Caleb Farley, but I do think Farley is going to drop a little bit. There are some medical concerns with him. He had a back surgery not too long ago. I feel like he could be a steal wherever he ends up, but I would be a little surprised if he ends up going this high just because of some medical issues. So instead, I think Newsome, who's a guy I'm really high on, who has that insane athleticism, quick twitch, recovery ability. I think he'd be a good fit.
I like that pick. I'll be honest. I do. I like that pick. They do need to address cornerback. Newsome to the Cardinals. Wow. This one it kind of feels Byron Murphy-ish, if you ask me. Maybe it's the purple.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have to think about that one for a second. Yeah, coming out of Washington. I did like that Byron Murphy pick a lot. He was the first pick of the second round a couple years ago, if I remember correctly. But I do still think, especially with Patrick Peterson, I know he's aging, but with him gone in Minnesota now, speaking of purple, he is a guy that they need to replace. And I do really like Newsome. He's been rising up the draft boards a little bit, tore up the pro day he had at Northwestern. So I think he's going to go decently high. This might be a little rich, but I absolutely think he's a first round pick. That moves us on to number 17 with the Las Vegas Raiders. Who do you have them taking?
You talk about a reach. I'm going with a reach here. But I mean, you see the Raiders do it all the time. You saw them go, I think it was top 5, was it, with the pick of that Clemson defensive end, Cleveland Ferrell? Like, what the heck? I mean, they went Henry Ruggs. They went Henry Ruggs. They like to go with reaches and who they truly believe is their guy. They got rid of Rodney Hudson. Let's go Landon Dickerson to the Las Vegas Raiders.
Ooh, okay. I like the logic. They made reaches before. They're going to make reaches again. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean, it's definitely something I could see the Raiders doing. When they had Farrell in 2019, I believe they had 3 first rounders and ended up taking Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Abram later in the first round. And those picks, at least going into that draft, made more sense value-wise. I mean, it would be like we saw the Raiders a couple years ago trade Khalil Mack, and then Gruden bitched about not having pass rushers. I mean, that's really stupid. I can't. Yeah. I don't have anything clever for that. And it would be very like him to trade Rodney Hudson, trade Gabe Jackson, and then say I don't have a good enough offensive line, and then reach to try to fill it. So this scenario with Sewell, Slater, Darisaw, Vera Tucker off the board, I could see it. I really could. I like Dickerson. I feel like he would be going a lot higher if it weren't for his medical concerns. I still think 17 might be a little rich for him, but I really don't think this one's crazy.
All right, let's head to the Dolphins.
Okay, yeah, that's right. I got the Dolphins' second pick at number 18. I have this being a pass rusher. And so far, amazingly, we've only had one come off the board, and that was Ojulari at 11 to the Giants. I thought about, I was going to have a bit of a bigger surprise name here, but in this situation, speaking of Miami, Jalen Phillips is falling right into their lap. He is my number 1 pass rusher on my board personally, and I think if he's still there at number 18, the Dolphins are going to scoop him up.
I think I have him boxed here in my draft. Oh, I got Ojulari. And anyway, I could see it. I think they do go edge regardless of who's on the board here at 18. It just makes a lot of sense. You got your wide receiver at 6. Now's your opportunity to help bolster that defense. And Jalen Phillips, I like him a lot. He's my favorite edge pass rusher, however you want to say it. Brings a lot to the table. I like him. I think this is a good pick as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see what happens. Phillips is a guy who had a bit of a bizarre college career, was at UCLA, had a brief retirement, and then played at Miami. He played 1 year this past season without Gregory Rousseau, who opted out of 2020. So, those two never played together. But to me, Phillips, as long as a team is comfortable, advancing past some of those medical red flags, he's going to go in the first round. I have no doubt. We saw the Dolphins take Austin Jackson, the tackle out of USC, who was a bit of a reach at this spot. I don't think Phillips would be a reach, but in terms of that medical concern kind of situation, I see some similarities. This is a pick I'm really curious to see next, though. Who do you have the Washington football team taking at number 19?
Quarterback Trey Lance.
This is where you have him going.
Yes.
Yeah, it was fortunate for you that you ended up with the odd-numbered teams that in this scenario don't have to trade up for a QB. But do you think you would, in this case, let me guess, have him sit behind Fitzpatrick for a year and develop?
Yep, that's how I would. That's how I would approach it. And I mean, obviously, if there were trades in this draft, I think we see 5 quarterbacks go at least in the top 12. So I don't think there's a chance that he falls this far in the draft. You could potentially see Mac Jones fall this far. I believe that. But someone with Trey Lance's upside, I think the way that he could potentially develop, teams are going to love that. So it could be a team like the Chicago Bears trade up and get Lance, another quarterback project. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't put it past them.
No, I wouldn't either. The Bears are weird, man. And that leads us to the 20th overall pick, where they are picking, not making a trade in this scenario. So to me, this was a really tough one too. I thought about this one more than the Cardinals. And now that the fact that all 5 quarterbacks are off the board, but there are several defensive players who haven't been taken yet. I mean, that's a really difficult one for me. Micah Parsons is still on the board, but I don't know if I see the Bears going linebacker here. But at the same time, putting myself in the Bears' shoes, they got to show some desperation here, right? Yeah, we have Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy probably, managing coaching for their jobs. And that's why I think they might be desperate and trade up for a quarterback in the real draft. But in this scenario, they got to swing for the fences. So I'm going to have him picking Caleb Farley here, actually, out of Virginia Tech. I think he has the highest upside of any corner in the class. The fact that he only started playing the position a couple years ago, he was originally a wide receiver, is amazing. But the football IQ he has, he recognizes route concepts extremely well, has the athleticism, fluidity to play both man and zone coverage. I thought about a lot of things here. Saying swing for the fences, I thought about Kadarius Toney a lot. I thought about Parsons, but I just don't see that being the guy. They let Kyle Fuller walk. I know they drafted Jalen Johnson. They got Kindle Vildor in last year's draft. Artie Burns is coming back from an injury, but I just don't see those as very inspiring options. And to me, at least upside wise, while Nagy and Pace probably won't be around to see it, Farley could end up being a Pro Bowl corner.
Oh, yeah. I like it. I mean, Farley, we mentioned the medicals. He's got the back issue. And you saw the Bears last season in the second round take someone with medical issues at the cornerback position with Jalen Johnson, and it worked. So, I mean, the Bears, it's definitely an interesting spot for them. They need to upgrade playmaking, and Farley could be one of those. But let's get to the Colts real quick.
Yeah, I mean, that Bears pick was definitely one of my least confident ones in this mock draft. If that ends up happening, I will be shocked. I'll just say it. But I mean, we're having fun. It's our podcast. So if you don't like it, suck it. But anyway, you know what? We'll cut that part out. That's a little mean. But yeah, that 20th, I'll start over. That 20th pick with the Bears, no trades. That was a really tough one for me to predict. I would honestly be surprised if it ends up being Farley, but in this scenario, there's a lot of different options. The Colts, 21, they're an interesting team. Who you got them taking?
They are interesting. And in every single mock that I've done, I went Liam Eichenberg. I'm going to change that today. I think they value defensive versatility, and that's where they go with edge rusher Kwity Paye out of Michigan.
Ooh, okay. I did think about this one in my own mock as well. I didn't end up making that pick, but he was definitely one of a few guys I had under consideration. We talked about Paye a little bit extensively on this show before, because I still think he's a guy the Giants will absolutely consider at number 11. But I do think the Colts could absolutely use an upgrade at that pass rusher spot. Paye, I don't think would be a reach at this point in the draft. I think 21 is more fair value for him than number 11 would be. And with Ojulari and Jalen Phillips off the board in this situation, I could see it. I do think offensive tackle is still a position that they will strongly consider addressing. And I think the Colts are a good candidate to trade back a few spots. We've seen them do that successfully many times in the recent past. But if they do stay at 21, Kwity Paye could be a fair value.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think that's the pick. I mean, I thought potentially if Caleb Farley was here, they tried that experiment with the Malik Hooker, an injury-prone defensive back. Didn't really help them out at all. Didn't really go in their favor. But I think Kwity Paye here just makes a lot of sense. Chris Ballard likes versatile football players. They can move him around a little bit. Pay to the Colts.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely versatile. That's no argument there. Moving on, 22, the Tennessee Titans. They were a tough one for me. Not quite as tough as Chicago, though, but I'm going to go a little bit off the board here. So we've seen them, pretty much every mock I've seen has them going Rashad Bateman, wide receiver out of Minnesota in the spot. I do think it's going to be a wide receiver, but a few years ago, top 5, they drafted Corey Davis, who was good, but not great, right? To me, I don't see a super high ceiling with Rashad Bateman. I think he will be a very good player. He could be a strong wide receiver too. I don't see too much of that number 1 wide receiver ability personally. I could be proven very wrong on that. But I feel like the Titans are going to want to take a bigger swing after Corey Davis didn't quite work out for them. So I have them going Terrace Marshall out of LSU here.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. He's big, but he has speed. So a lot of people figure that he's going to be like this big-bodied Allen Robinson type. No, go watch the game tape. He's quick and he's big. So he can still high point the football. He's probably not going to be as physical, but he has some pretty solid speed. You put him opposite of A.J. Brown, you're throwing just some twin towers out there, and one of them's got breakaway speed.
I love the guy. I know I talked about him as a draft sleeper last year. He's just one of my, I'll stand on the table for him guys. I really do think he could make an impact. He's a higher upside pick. But that's just where I'm going. We're going to see a few curveballs here in the draft. I think that's going to be a potential one at 22. Moving on, 23, the New York Jets have another pick. Who do you have them taking?
Oh, the Jets fans are licking their chops after the first day. Every single one of them heading on the streets of New York talking their crap because they got Micah Parsons at 23.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I would have done here as well if he's still available. I did have the Jets taking an edge rusher in the draft I did here. Well, the one I'm going to post and the one I did for this podcast without any trades, because in those scenarios, Parsons was long off the board. So was Owusu Koromoa and Zaven Collins. So I didn't see the spot for a linebacker. And I do think the Jets are going to want more than just Carl Lawson and Zuniga at that pass rushing spot. But I mean, he could absolutely revolutionize the second level of that defense. He has the versatility to cover. He has a effectiveness as a blitzer. I don't think it's impossible that he slips a little bit just because of some potential character concerns, but pure talent alone, he would be an absolute steal at 23.
Yeah, he would. And I mean, the defense just needs bodies and good football players in New York on the Jets side of things. And I think Micah Parsons can be that defensive linebacker that could really step in there day one and make an impact.
I could say, I mean, to me, he's a day one guy. I mean, we saw Isaiah Simmons go number 8 last year, and I'm not trying to compare these players, but I think Parsons will end up falling a little bit unless the Lions stay and take him at number 7, and I just don't see that happening. I think they're going to trade out, so I could see him falling into the teens. I'd be really surprised if he ends up falling to 23 in the actual draft, but God, it would be one hell of a value. Moving on, 24 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are a team that was, to me, a very interesting one to pick for. They have a lot of fascinating scenarios in this mock. I really strongly considered a running back here. But I did not end up pulling the trigger. I know James Conner was gone. I know that the Steelers absolutely have a need at the position, but I just, in general, I'm not a big proponent of picking a running back in the first round. I feel like you can get good value in the second or third round from that position. So I skipped it. Now, there were a couple other positions I considered, but I already mocked Newsome and Farley in this situation. So I don't see them going corner here either. They need a center to replace Pouncey, so I have them going Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma here.
Ooh, is it a little bit of a reach?
I think it might be a little bit of a reach, but first of all, he's a left-handed center and I'm left-handed. So that alone makes it, worth the pick. Right. But to me, he is outside of Dickerson, and I'm still curious to see how teams view him, but outside of Dickerson, he's the best center in the draft to me. And we've seen guys like this go a little bit higher than you might expect in recent years with guys like Eric McCoy or Cesar Ruiz in recent drafts. I feel like Humphrey's going to go higher than people realize. I would be a little surprised, quite honestly, if it's this high. but I don't think it's impossible that he sneaks into the end of the first round. And the Steelers absolutely have a need at the position. So that's why I have them going here. I just feel like that's slightly more likely than a running back, but I could absolutely see it being Najee Harris as well. But I'm sure you've been waiting for this one, and I think I know who you're going to take here. But 25 Jaguars, who you got?
I got him going Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Yeah,
I
that's
do.
exactly who I thought you were going to take.
I mean, if he falls to 25, I have the Browns moving up to 21 to get him. I think right now, if you could bring Owusu-Koramoah to that defense, they could be on day one, week one, the best linebacking crew in the National Football League. You have Miles Jack on one side, Jock on the other side, great speed, great ability to cover running backs, good in coverage, great on the outside, and then you put Joe Schobert in the middle. I mean, those three linebackers are pretty good. Now, the secondary could still use some work. You got Shaquille Griffin that you signed. You still have Henderson in year 2. So there still could be some improvement there. But I think best player on the board right here is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Yeah, I think it would be a great value at number 25. In the mock I did without any trades in preparation, I had him falling to this spot as well. And I know how much you love him as a biased Notre Dame fan, of course. But now, and you mentioned his coverage ability. I think we do have to put out there, he was a safety before he was converted to linebacker, and he still has safety coverage ability, which is great. But you do kind of expect him to be good in coverage once you know that. But the versatility, the potential upside as a pass rusher, I do like him a lot. I think he's a fantastic athlete. That moves on to the Cleveland Browns at number 26. And I don't think it's impossible they move up or down and get some more picks. But in this situation, I mean, I thought about pass rusher, but they did bring in Jadeveon Clowney. I thought about defensive tackle with Christian Barmore. And I think would have picked him, but I do think they need some help on the second level. And in this situation, Zaven Collins is still available out of Tulsa. And I think he's going to end up in the first round because that man is 6'4", measured 270 at his pro day, and still flies around the field with some of the speed and the thumping ability that you just don't see from people his size. And I feel like he would have a great impact on the second level of the Browns defense as well. They missed Joe Schobert. Yeah. But I'm not trying to compare the players, but I think Collins would be a fantastic value at 26. I like him a lot.
I like that. I mean, the Browns are one of the teams that don't have a need on their football team. And that's weird to say because it's Cleveland. Like you would expect them to have a bunch of needs. But right now it's like the Browns are just picking a football player and see if it sticks. I mean, they don't really need someone that can come in on day one. And I think that's a great pick at that spot to get someone with that height and that could play the position well.
I mean, one of the heaviest guys I've ever seen at that position who still has ridiculous speed and athleticism and some power flashes. I really, really like him. So 27th overall, the Baltimore Ravens are going to pick, and they also have the 31st pick, which you'll do in a minute after they made a trade with the Chiefs for regarding Orlando Brown. Excuse me, I apologize. But for this first of their 2 first-round picks at number 27, who do you have the Baltimore Ravens selecting?
I don't like this pick, but I'm going to do it anyway. They're going to be going with an edge, and that edge is Jason Oweh from Penn State.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one second. I'm putting that on my own board here to make sure I don't get confused. So I'm just going to say it here. In the one of the drafts I did, like the one with no trades, I had Oweh going 18 to the Dolphins. I thought he was the guy they might reach for. I feel like because of his ridiculous traits, he was going to be a guy that they targeted. Now, Oweh is a really interesting one. I would have mocked him to either the Ravens or the Bills at number 30, who we haven't gotten to yet. If the Dolphins pass on him, I do think he will be a first round player. I think 32 with the Buccaneers would be his floor. But Oweh's a guy who had 0 sacks last year, which is amazing. You don't really see that too much. Kind of reminds me of Jason Pierre-Paul in some ways in terms of not a lot of production in college, but the Giants ended up picking him at 15 because of his insane athleticism, raw upside, and it ended up working out pretty well overall, I would say. I could see Oweh being a similar guy, but the Ravens in general have usually targeted pass rushers who had a lot of college production. So that's why I personally lean towards Joe Tryon there for them. I do think Oweh has more upside, but I think he's incredibly raw and is unlikely to have too much of a year one impact. But the Ravens absolutely need pass rushers, so I'm here for that one.
Yeah, and their defense is good enough to where you don't need him right away. So it's a nice spot for him to go to because he doesn't need to make that impact on the first day of the season or first game, whatever it is. So it could be a developmental project for sure.
No doubt. Now, moving on really quick here to 28 overall, that would be the New Orleans Saints, a team that had to do a lot of salary cap moves in the offseason and really retool their roster. Drew Brees is retired, but I do not have them reaching for a quarterback here, if that's what you're wondering. I think corner is a position they would target, but the top four guys are all off the board already in this situation, and they lost Trey Hendrickson to the Bengals. So I mentioned him a second ago. I'm going to go Joe Tryon out of Washington here, the edge rusher.
Wow. I mean, you do see late in the first round, players that you don't usually see people have mocked because organizations tend to take big swings or they just like players and they're really quiet about it, especially late. Because I mean, these are teams that made the playoffs. They're teams that usually have a pretty solid front office. But I mean, that's a pick that kind of has me scratching my head, but I guess it makes sense because of the loss of the position.
They still have a decent amount of needs, I think. I mean, I thought about giving them another wide receiver, but Taysom Hill will probably end up just throwing the ball to himself the way Sean Payton likes to use him. And you can't forget, they still have Alvin Kamara as the ultimate weapon. I could see them addressing the corner spot if they wanted to go for a guy like Melifonwu or Eric Stokes or something like that. But I feel like 28 would be a little rich for both of those guys. And they absolutely still need to address that pass rushing position. Cameron Jordan is getting older in this part of his career. It's something they need to look at long term. I still think the Saints trading down and getting a couple more picks is a strong option for them here for a team looking to move back up into the end of the first. But in this scenario, I think Tryon is a guy who fits a need and is very fair value at 28th overall.
All right, so Tryon goes 28th. At 29, I have the Green Bay Packers finally taking a weapon in the first round. And it's going to be wide receiver Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love it so much. He would be a perfect fit, man. I think Elijah Moore is going to end up being a late first or early second round pick at the very latest in this draft. And I'm sure Packers fans listening to this are going to be happy to hear you say that, considering they've needed some extra weapons for Aaron Rodgers for a little while. And he could finally have a first round wideout to throw to that's not named Mercedes Lewis. So, yeah, you would get that joke.
Yeah.
Amazingly, he's the only guy that Rodgers has ever had that's a first round pick that he's thrown a touchdown to. But to me, Elijah Moore, I absolutely love him out of the slot, the explosiveness, the run after the catchability. I think the route running and hands are there. I thought about putting Rashad Bateman in this spot since he hasn't gone yet. But I just don't see that same upside. And I feel like the Packers want to swing for the fences here. They had, to me, the weirdest draft of any team last year. I think they're going to come slightly more back to reality here and go for some high ceiling guys end of round one and try to get one more championship run out of Aaron Rodgers. And I think Elijah Moore helps them do that. 30th overall pick, the Buffalo Bills. They have one of the most well-rounded rosters in the NFL, especially on the defensive side. I think they can kind of treat this as a luxury pick a little bit. I think that this is where the fall is going to stop. I have them going Rashad Bateman, wide receiver out of Minnesota with this pick.
Oh, you dog. I had him going next pick to Baltimore. I mean, that would have just been a good fit. You know, Baltimore doesn't have those big-bodied wide receivers. They have the small Marquise Hollywood Brown, just the smaller, speedy wide receivers. And you're going to hamstring me into picking another one at 31.
Mm-hmm. Good luck.
Oh, good luck to me.
No, I still think the Ravens are a candidate to make a trade up in the draft with 27 and 31. But in this scenario, no trades. So who do you have them picking?
If this is exactly how the draft plays out, I have them trading out of the first round with this pick, even though they just traded to acquire it. Right now, I'm going to have them taking Kadarius Toney. I mean, you have to take a weapon. And maybe earlier with Justin Oweh, I probably should have gone Rashad Bateman there. But I mean, Kadarius Toney is still not a bad wide receiver. He has a lot of speed. He got down the field pretty well for Kyle Trask, and I think he could step in and still have a productive role on this offense, even if he's similar to Marquise Brown.
Yeah, I mean, well, Marquise Brown to me is still not, I'm not entirely sold that the Ravens are going to keep him around or that they might not look to upgrade the position. Now, Tony to me is an electrifying slot receiver as well, but I think he is extremely raw. I'm not quite as high on him as most people. I personally have him falling into the second round, but I absolutely could see him going as high as number 20 to the Bears. I definitely see the upside with him. And that special teams and juice ability, it's there. That leaves me 32nd, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, what do you pick for a team that has everything? It was a really difficult one for me. I decided to just go best player available. Now, the way that this mock draft shaped up or bottomed out, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of quality players left on the board. Now I was leaning edge rusher for a long time, but I don't think the best player left on the board is an edge rusher. And I don't think he's going to fall this far in the actual draft. But to me, best player left, 32, I have Tevin Jenkins, offensive tackle from Oklahoma State. You can never have enough protection for your quarterback, for your offense. And to me, he would be an absolute steal at this spot. I considered him at Green Bay. I considered him at as high as Indy and the Jets. But if he's still there at 32, I have him going in this spot.
Funny you say that because I'm looking at my mock draft that I did, and I did it when the Chiefs still had the pick. I had Tevin Jenkins 31 to the Chiefs. I thought that made sense, upgrading their tackle, which they ended up doing just via trade. The Buccaneers, I mean, like you said, this is a tough spot. I mean, you don't know what they're going to do here. So I guess you could see offensive tackle, but I mean, you just drafted worse last season. I mean, I probably wouldn't go tackle if I were Tampa Bay. I'd probably go swing for a fence on a different position because at least they could probably get on the field a little bit more.
Yeah, I get that, but I still think long term, Donovan Smith isn't the best option at left tackle. I feel like it's just a thing that smart teams do is get that long term guy in place at a premium position when you have the luxury to be able to take them whenever you want. And then the edge rusher spot, I mean, I thought about Greg Rousseau. I really thought about Peyton Turner, who I really like out of Houston, and I think he's going to be an early day 2 pick. I could see it being Rousseau. They definitely got a lot of production out of Jason Pierre-Paul last year, but I think that would be their most likely route per se. I don't think Tevin Jenkins is going to be on the board at number 32, but the Buccaneers have the luxury of going best player available. To me, I don't have a question. I think he's going to end up like somewhere between 15 and 22 maybe on my big board. If he's available at 32, he would be a steal value wise, and you can never have enough assets at a premium position. We talk about it with wide receivers and corners and edge rushers. I think it applies to offensive tackles too.
That makes sense. If you look, one team that did this before was the Jacksonville Jaguars. They drafted Cam Robinson at the beginning of round 2. I believe they traded up to do so. And they also had Brandon Albert, that longtime left tackle for Miami. He was also on the roster, and Cam Robinson performed so well in training camp that it forced Albert into retirement. So probably not the case here for Donovan Smith, but I think I like that pick the more that you talk about it.
I mean, I can always sell people on the picks that I make. There is some method to the madness, man. But before I go here really quick, before we sign off, I do want to say one more time, everyone make sure to keep an eye out for that top 300 big board and the full 7-round mock draft here. Going to be up on our Twitter page and Instagram, everything else, social media. Take a look at it. Give me any sort of feedback on it. Been working on it for a while, so I'm excited for everyone to take a look at it. See who I have your favorite team picking, and then yell at me when it's not the guy you want. I invite that. I really do want to get everyone's thoughts on it. Also, I want everyone to give us some feedback on this mock draft we just did. I have a list of it here. We can share this here on our Twitter page as well. Just a fun no trades one. I know this is obviously not going to end up being what happens on Thursday, but I still think it was really fascinating hypothetical to go through. A lot of talented players still on the board. No defensive tackles went in that first round. I still think it's the shittiest position, but it's just what makes the draft so fun, man. It's so unpredictable. Teams value these players differently than we do. It's going to be really exciting. I can't wait.
It will be exciting, and that's going to do it for today. Actually, you know what? I'm going to make one more pick if I can. 33 to the Jaguars. They're getting Pat Freiermuth, tight end. I feel like that's someone. If this happens for the Jaguars, where they get Trevor Lawrence, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and Pat Freiermuth, I'm going to be going insane. That's a heck of a draft to start it off for you, for the Jaguars. But anyway, that's going to do it for today. Odd note to wrap it up. But anyway, that's going to do it for today. Like we said, Check out on social media. I'm excited to see your whole big board that you got going on, all your 7-round mocks. It's going to require a lot of work, and it's been something that you put in a very long time over these last few months with watching film and taking notes. But I'm excited to watch that going forward and see what you put out there.
Yeah, me too, man. I appreciate it. I'm hoping everyone enjoys it. I'll have it out the day before the drafts. That means Wednesday night, my work will be done. I can relax and enjoy it, and then watch the 3 days of the draft coverage after that. But I can't wait for it. It's one of my favorite weeks of the year. I'm going to be watching all 259 picks. I can promise you that.
Check us out, everybody, on social media at Big City Sports PD on Twitter, Big City Sports Pod on Instagram. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, any platform. We're there. Just search Big City Sports Podcast and you will get our content. But other than that, that's going to wrap it up for today. Leave a like, leave a subscription, do your little things that you like to do, leave a review. We'd love to get that feedback. And that's going to do it. So I appreciate everybody that tuned in today. Good luck in the draft. Excited to see who your teams will take. But going forward, that's going to wrap it up. See you guys next time.